Welcome. We're going to convene the City Commission meeting for Wednesday, February 19th. And we'll start with roll call. The mayor is excused this evening.
Commissioner Scott Wilson.
Here.
Commissioner Adam Marl.
Here.
Commissioner Mike Mitchell.
Here.
And Commission President Rocky Smith.
Here. All right, if you join us for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we don't have any ceremonies and proclamations tonight, and that makes us move on to public comments, which I'm not sure if we have any. All right. We'll call everyone up individually, and then you'll have 3 minutes. It's all right. And state your name and city of residence. We have one public comment, and that would be Dee Dee Dahlstrom. And you can come right up. Yes.
Maybe I should have a special sign besides everyone going. Anyway, thank you for calling me earlier. So it's on the consent agenda, and so I thought we'd whip along. I'm from Ely. Let me start this. My name is Dee Dee Dahlstrom. I live in Oregon City and the neighborhood Elyville. On item B in the consent agenda, you're making the contract for or agreeing to the contract of our lovely flower program and baskets and planting boxes. I kind of feel in the last few years, Elyville has been overlooked. I wrote last May or June thinking, maybe I could get some more flowers up there, but they said to write back in like November, December. Well, of course I forgot. So anyway, saw this on the agenda, and I would like to request that Elyville get more than one basket. Everyone has at least 8 to 10, because I've counted them. If we could get baskets on the corner of Pearl Street, which is a very large intersection, and for us, and also at Holmes Road, I think would be very nice. The only basket we have in Elyville that is put up is usually down by Dutch Brothers. So it's right on our border. It's kind of like, is that Elyville? I'm not sure. So anyway, I would love some extra, if you got some benches around. We see more people walking up and down Molalla, and we're trying to encourage that. Maybe we'll start getting more businesses at the bottom levels of our developments on Main Street or on Molalla. But with that comes benches for people to rest and wait for the buses. Now, most of the buses do have benches. But, just want to try to spruce up our little neighborhood too. So that's all I have to say. And if that could be submitted, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, is there any other public comment? All right, seeing none, we move on to presentations, and our first presentation tonight is Library Board. So we'll have our Library Director, Greg Williams, and Chair of the Library Board, David Goldberg.
Good evening. City Commissioners Tony, Alex, I'm David Goldberg. I'm the chair of the Oregon City Public Library Advisory Board, and I live in unincorporated Clackamas County. It's my pleasure to share with you the accomplishments of the library and over the past year. Thank you for your support. We've had a great year of recovery, finally, following all the COVID experience, and our activity is back to pre-COVID times. We continue to provide a broad range of services, events, classes, and activities that seem to be well received by the community. We have a strong, dedicated board, incredibly capable senior management, and our capable and committed library staff. Once again, we rank very high in the community satisfaction survey, and we plan to repeat this survey to the unincorporated area, which we did last year in order to track how we're perceived by that 40% of our district that live outside of the city limits. We want to acknowledge the strong support that we receive from the Oregon City Library Foundation and the Friends of the Library. Their financial support will enable us to increase our service and reach to a large service area over 100 square miles through a planned purchase of book lockers, which will enable after-hours access to holds and people be able to return things, and a mobile library vehicle, which we plan to purchase in the coming biennium. And we're well on our way to having the funds available to do that. Oregon City Public Library was the first library in Clackamas County to work with our local school board to enable every student in the Oregon City Public Schools to get a library card with parental consent. And this has been put into place, and it's been effective. We've increased, I don't know, over 1,000, 2,500 new library cards issued to students. We do face some challenges. We only have 2 managers for more than 30 staff, and this is sort of unrealistic for any organization in terms of scheduling, evaluating, planning for staff. And that's been an irritant, and it really has gotten in the way of allowing our qualified librarians to do library work rather than clerical work and the administration of running that many people. Inflationary pressures are impacting our budget as they are throughout the city. Increases in the cost of staff benefits, energy, and the increased cost of ebooks, and Mike, we were just talking about that, which is affecting libraries across the country where the publishers have now do not sell us ebooks. They basically license us to use ebooks, and it's become incredibly expensive, 40 to 50 to 60 times more expensive than a hardcover book. We anticipate multiple facility capital repair and replacement projects, which will be required in the coming few years and will likely cost more than $1 million. This includes an HVAC system, which in the next 5 years or so will probably need to be replaced. It's a challenging time for libraries across our nation with attempted book bans and threats to the right to read. Our board and staff are committed to ensuring our community continues to have access to books and other materials that reflect the diversity of our entire community. Clackamas County has just reinvigorated the Library District Task Force that was halted because of COVID. We need your support for this project and hope it will lead to a new district ballot measure with an increased rate in the coming years. Once again, thank you for your continued support. We're committed to providing the excellent library services to our community, and I'd be happy to address any questions.
All right, thank you. Any questions? Go ahead, Commissioner Morrow.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. First of all, we really appreciate all the great work that the library staff and the library board are doing for our community, and the satisfaction shows, as you just mentioned, in the community survey. For the student library card initiative, which has been really exciting, is that a blanket for all students regardless of if they live in the library district? So I'm thinking like if there's a student who lives in West Lynn and they have a district transfer to attend Oregon City High School for some reason.
That's a great question, Commissioner Morrill. Right now, Oregon City was the pilot program for all Link libraries. And so we worked with our libraries to kind of say, if other libraries are going to do this, what's kind of a way, a platform that would make this happen. So we have blazed the trail. As you all know, boundaries are weird things, right? So school district boundaries are sometimes don't line up with library service districts. We are hopeful that other libraries and other school districts will choose to emulate what we have done in the coming years. We've been very open with this is how we did it. One of the great things is that most of the school districts use the same software on their end. And so what we've been able to put in place, any other school district can basically take that up and implement it with their local library. Some of the conversations just have to have are different school districts just have different policies and different capacities for how they want to move forward with this. But we are hopeful that other school districts in Clackamas County in the coming years will follow our lead.
So it is all students,
All
regardless
students
of-
within
okay.
the Oregon City School District service area boundary,
Okay,
yes.
okay,
So
thank
we get their data, but somebody from the Westland School District, no. But
Okay.
And they use their student ID card, so
Yes.
it's a single seamless
Nice.
card.
And I think, I believe Commissioner Smith probably knows better than I do. I believe enrollment just started or starts for next year within like
I don't know.
around this week.
I don't
So
know.
we're really excited. This will be the second year that,
Yeah.
we're making this available to parents to sign up for as part of enrollment.
Great, thank you.
Very good. All right, any other comments or questions? Go ahead.
Just real, thank you for everything you do. Thank you for being responsive to the community. For instance, expanding your Sunday hours based on the demand that you were seeing. Those kind of things make a big difference. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate it. And I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the efforts of our staff. We have an amazing library staff. They're the ones that do they make the magic happen. And I would also be remiss if I did not acknowledge the support of our library board, who, when we have ideas about how to expand services and how to make it more accessible to the community, they are always engaged and enthusiastic and on board with providing us the support that we need.
And we want to thank the city facility department also. This project to replace the floors was really done seamlessly. It was amazing for as much ripping out and construction that was required there, how smoothly it went. So thank you.
Very good, thank you. All right, that brings us to 5B. This will be a presentation, WIFIA program, Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act. And I believe Dana Webb, Public Works Director, Matt Zook, Finance Director, and Patty Nelson, Senior Project Engineer.
All right. Good evening, Commissioners. It's been a year and a half since we've been here, and we felt it would be a good time to update you on our WIFIA program. For those who don't know what WIFIA stands for, it's the Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act. It's a funding program through the EPA for water projects. So we have been granted a loan for that. Next. Oh, thank you. There we go. Just a quick overview. We're going to give you a little background. There's some new faces here. Also talk about the scope of the program and then update you about then and now. So when we first entered into the loan versus now, our progress, and then Matt's going to talk about the financing. So the program background, this all started with the master plan back in January 2020. The city adopted an amendment to the water master plan, identifying $81 million worth of water capital improvements. With that, we need to find funding. So we did a rate study. We have two sources of funding. We have water systems development charges, and we have water rates. The rate study identified a need to increase the water SDCs, which the city commission did. The other portion of that is that we had to increase the water rates above our 3% annual increase that's limited by our city charter. That requires a vote of the people. So in November 2021, we took two ballot measures to the voters. One authorized us to borrow money. That's also a charter limitation, so we have to get voter approval to borrow money. And then also asked for approval to raise rates temporarily above the 3% annual charter limit. Voters approved the borrowing, they did not approve the rate increase. After that approval, we were able to pursue the Water Infrastructure and Finance Innovation Act loan. I'm going to let Matt talk about the special provisions that is. It's a unique system.
Yeah, so good evening, commissioners. As you know, this is a federal program funded several years ago. So we are anticipating continuing to participate in that program. We have not received any kind of federal notification that funding has stopped. So that being said, we got some really favorable terms. Back in almost a year and a half ago, we closed on this loan at a 3.94% interest rate, and we borrowed 49% of the overall cost. So that's about $16 million that we can borrow, and the city will kick in the match of 16.9. And so that's how you get the 32 plus $33 million over the projects. It's a longer term loan, and And one of the strategies that we took in this was to actually pay for the city's portion first so that we can delay the financing costs, draw at the end, and we're managing those funds well in order to make sure our cash flow is fine, and there's been no issues with that. We anticipate probably drawing down on basically think of it as a construction loan. We'll be drawing down on it probably a little bit this year and then into the future years. The construction period is about 5 years, so we're really pleased with that, with what we got there, and we've been in compliance with the WIFIA requirements and that sort of thing. So,
A couple of things I wanted to highlight, and correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, is that one, we don't accrue interest until we start borrowing, so that feeds into the strategy. We also don't have to make payments until, I think, 5 years after we complete the projects. So those are a lot of things that helped us in terms of working the numbers without the rate increase. And then I also made a note here, because we didn't get the rate increase, there was a question whether or not we could even finance it, whether or not we could come up with our 51%. We were fortunate in a sense that the city made a decision to make money available. That was made possible because they received ARPA dollars elsewhere. So that was $5.6 million that helped us meet our matching funds and made this possible. And what does this mean to our water projects? So annually, this just as to give you relative, impact to our capital. So annually, we typically take a little bite out of the apple, $2 million a year, get a couple projects done. Because of the size of the loan and the money that we're receiving, we're able to, on average over this next 5 years, increase our annual capital improvements to $6 million. It's a huge impact. And what it does for us, and you'll see in a minute, is we can actually tackle some of the large projects, very expensive projects that have been, kicked down the road because we haven't been able to afford it with the $2 million a year capital funding. So this program is made up into 3 projects. That's how the EPA looks at it. And the first project is a very small project, but one of the things that they look for is ways to improve our security. So we had one element that was left to be completed for a SCADA isolation project. So that is part of our project. It's a small project of $104,000, but it is an important piece that will help to separate out our SCADA system from the business network and make us more secure. The second project is a pipe rehabilitation program, so it's continuing to do that rehabilitation. That is a picture of one of our old pipes that we've actually dug up. So yes, that is pipes that we drink from. And then we have the upper system transmission improvement projects. So for the program, there's different elements. We have reporting coordination, which Matt had talked about. We have quarterly reports that we have to submit. We're providing construction updates on any projects that are in construction. Matt just finished submitting an annual financial model. That's something that we do annually. Whenever we complete a project, we have to submit our bid documents and contracts to EPA to show that we're in compliance. And then a unique element is that when we went through our loan process, the Confederate Tribes of Grand Ronde had flagged a few of our projects and requested that we do archaeological reports and review. And then based on the reporting, if construction monitoring is recommended, to incorporate that into our projects. So we have done that with Main Street was our first, Claremont was our second, and then Malala is going to be starting up, and we also have some archaeological monitoring during that. We have not found anything significant so far, which is good, but we continue to keep that relationship going and that progress. We also have project deliveries. That's a major component. We have to deliver these projects. We did develop the program with some flexibility because when we were closing on the loan, costs were increasing significantly. And we weren't sure how that would hit our projects and what the scale was. So we have to complete the first project, which is the SCADA isolation project. The second project, the pipe rehab, we built in flexibility. And so our metric that we have to meet is to reduce pipe breaks. And so completing any of our rehab projects really helps us get there. So that's where we have flexibility in terms of if we get in a budget crunch, where we can reduce how much work we're gonna get done. And that's in fact what we're having to do. And then the transmission projects, there's 4 projects. All of those together are going to help us increase our pumping capacity what we call the upper system, which is basically south of Mountain View Street. It represents serving 70% of our customers. Right now, we really struggle during the summer months trying to pump enough water to deliver water for the customers. And there's also a growing need with the Thimble Creek Concept Plan area as well. Oh, I missed one critical point. All this work, all the projects have to be substantially complete by June 30th, 2028. So that's a firm deadline. So the first project, I think I've already talked a little bit about it. It's a very small project, installing a firewall. That's a technical term. There has been no change in the project budget. We've been teaming up with our IT department. We've got 50% of it complete, and we're looking to complete it this fiscal year. The rehab project, I have a couple graphs in here. We mentioned we completed the Main Street project, Claremont project. Holmes Lane is under construction right now. You may be aware of that. I've included two different graphs, one illustrating the difference of the cost for the rehab program and also how much pipe we're able to complete. So on the left, we originally planned to complete 8 projects for $5.5 million. Now we're only able to complete 5 projects for $6.8 million. So originally we had hoped to replace 18,500 linear feet of pipe, and now we can only afford to do 10,300 linear feet of pipe. So again, you know, because all the projects, I think the rehab projects have been running about 50% more. The transmission mains have been tracking about 45% more. And because they're larger, it's a lot more money. So on the upper system transmission projects, Malala is the first one out of the gate. We have awarded the contract to Emery & Sons. I have a slide after this. I can provide you a little more detail on that. The second project, and I was going to tell you the price, just to give you scale, Malala is an $8.6 million project. That's total design and construction. That's not just construction. Our next project, the Henrici project, that has 3 elements in it. That has a new pump station. It'll replace an existing aging and undersized pump station. It'll build a new 24-inch transmission main, and then it will also repurpose an existing transmission main into a distribution. It's a technical term. This is a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and the current budget is $13 million. So that puts that in perspective. It's a big project. For design, we're looking at completing that in April of next year, and then construction would go into 2027. Also kind of illustrating the cost differences. Originally, we thought we could complete these 4 projects for $16.7 million. Our current estimates are $24.5 million. And we continue to look at opportunities where we can value engineer or cut costs and make it more affordable. In terms of footage of pipe, we've got 12,500 linear feet of transmission main we had planned on building. We're building a little bit more, which has increased cost. We made a design decision on our Henrici project to, instead of designing the transmission main through private property, to stay on the right-of-way. And so I think, while it's a more costly decision, I think it's a better decision for the city in the long run. For the Malala project, you're going to see this shortly. Our contractors starting to mobilize out to the Mountain View Reservoir site this week. We have a long lead time on pipe, so you probably won't see any trenching or construction until April or May. But we do go down Holmes Street and then all the way down Malala. So we go from Holmes all the way crossing Beaver Creek, so people will know that we're coming. We've done outreach all through design, and we'll continue to do that through construction. We accomplished a lot of work with this project. Not only are we building a new transmission main, we made a design decision to abandon, there's another transmission main, an aging transmission main that was parallel. So originally we planned on a 24-inch main. By going to a 30-inch main, we're able to abandon that old 16-inch, which is one less asset that the city has to repair down the road. And then we're also replacing an existing 16-inch distribution main with an 8-inch main. So that's right parallel with the 30-inch. Trying to get as much work as we can to minimize, it's going to be disruptive, but try to get it all done with this project. Construction will go until June of 2026. And I just wanted to flag that we do have some nighttime work. When we have more information from the contractor, of course, we'll come back to the commission. But we have that flagged for the signalized intersections at Holmes Lane, Warner Milne, Colton Place, and Beaver Creek Road. Financing.
So one of the things that we mentioned was the annual financial model that we update. We did this back in 2023, and we've had some challenges, but we believe that the program's going to sail along smoothly. Some of the challenges that we've had is we built in some project contingency, and as Patty just informed you, that some of the costs have risen, and so that contingency is being eaten up within the project, which is there's two ways to respond to that. You can cut the scope, or you shift more onto the city's, the city's dime. We're going to continue to stay within the 33 million overall project. Then, of course, just as economics have changed, we've anticipated SDC revenue to be at a certain level, and development has slowed a bit. So some of that SDC revenue is dipping, but this is a long-range plan, so we believe there's sufficient funding within the water program overall to carry this through. And since these are our priority projects, this is really essentially what the city is doing for the next 5 years on water. So we'll see this again in the budget cycle, but this annual financial model that we submit to EPA, we submit that and update it annually. So we continue to monitor that and make sure that's going to flow. So.
Next slide. Any questions? All right.
All right.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that brings us to the adoption of the agenda. Is there anything on the consent agenda that needs to be pulled? Go ahead.
Not on the consent
Sorry.
agenda, but I would like to add an item if it's possible. I don't think it'll take long to start the discussion.
Okay.
Related to our city-sponsored special events
Oh,
program.
boy. And you don't think that's going to take long?
Well,
Okay.
just to get it on the
Okay, on the radar.
on the radar.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so where would we place that? Then we would put that general business. Okay, do we want to do that as, are we doing C? Yeah, so D? Okay. All right. All right, is there a motion? Go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry, I would like to pull 7B out of the
Okay.
consent agenda. if we
All
can.
right. All right, would we like to approve the remaining consent agenda?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda except for 7B.
I'll second that.
All right. Call for the vote.
Commissioner Scott Wilson,
Aye.
Commissioner Adam Marl,
Aye.
Commissioner Mike Mitchell,
Aye.
Commission President Rocky Smith.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, that brings us to 7B, personal service agreement with the Garden Corner for hanging baskets. Do you want to?
Yeah, so, as we heard, we had, public comment asking about additional baskets, and I would just kind of be curious, I think the two intersections mentioned were Holmes and Pearl.
Holmes and Pearl, yeah.
Were the two.
That's what I
And I would just be curious if it would be feasible to put baskets there, and if so, what the change in cost would be.
Okay.
All right,
Go ahead.
good evening. Dana Webb, Public Works Director. So the Public Works Department manages the hanging basket program. We do work closely with code enforcement because the program is funded out of code enforcement. So in the packet is the mapping of where the existing baskets are. Internally, as a staff, we've started discussions about possible modifications to the basket locations. We've been asked by another neighborhood association to identify baskets in their neighborhood. The baskets, they're hung in May. We essentially need to place our order so they can start growing our baskets, so they're ready to be hung in May. And I think where we headed as a staff was having some discussions, process this amendment, utilize the existing locations, and then discuss options for either spreading the baskets out more, equally distributed along some of the corridors, or look at options to add baskets. And so our intention was to have that discussion in the upcoming months and prepare that for the next year. So 2026 baskets.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, any other questions on B? All right, a motion to,
I'll move to approve item 7B.
I'll second that.
all right, moved and seconded.
Commissioner Scott Wilson,
Aye.
Commissioner Adam Marl,
Aye.
Commissioner Mike Mitchell,
Aye.
and Commission President Rocky Smith.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, that brings us to 8A. It's a public hearing, but we will do a staff presentation first. And I believe that will be Aquila Hurd-Ravitch and Pete Walter from Planning. Oh.
Yes, thank you. So as Pete kind of gets settled in, he's going to go through this legislative amendment. And I guess just to preface a little bit, we looked at adding kind of some minimal amount of language so that we can comply with the requirements from FEMA. So Pete will walk you through that and we can answer any questions you have.
Okay.
Good evening, Commissioners. So this is legislative file 2404, and the objective tonight is to conduct a public hearing for this legislative code amendment. The Commission's options tonight will be to approve the amendments as proposed, or to approve the amendments with revisions, or not approve the amendments and provide direction to staff. And the pre-implementation compliance measures, or PICMs, that I'm talking about are part of the city's National Flood Insurance Program. So this is just a map of our regulated floodplain. Oregon City has floodplain regulations that apply to new development within the Flood Management Overlay District, which is Chapter 17.42 of the City Code. It's an overlay district classification that defines areas subject to periodic flooding or inundation, which can result in property harm or loss, disruption of public services, hazards for public health, or added expense for public services. Updating the code from time to time is a requirement to remain in the National Flood Insurance Program, through which property owners receive flood insurance at a discounted rate. Compliance with the regulations is usually reviewed through a land use or building permit process, with the review shared between the Planning Division, Public Works, Engineering, and Building Divisions. The city's floodplain administrator is the city building official. A little background and history on what leads us to tonight's amendments. So in 2009, FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, was sued by environmental groups for not consulting with the National Marine Fisheries Services regarding the impacts of the National Flood Insurance Program on threatened and endangered species, allegedly violating the Endangered Species Act, or ESA. And a lot of time passed, and in 2016, NIMFS finally issued a biological opinion, and then in July 2024, FEMA notified Oregon cities and counties to take short-term, also known as pre-implementation compliance measures for development review in the flood hazard areas. And they are called pre-implementation compliance measures because FEMA has not yet completed an environmental impact assessment that responds through the normal federal process. And due to the very short deadlines imposed by FEMA, Oregon City has chosen to do what most Oregon cities and counties have defaulted to in the short term, which is to comply with these requirements through a permit-by-permit approach, which is what FEMA calls it. Then we would take a wait-and-see approach as the EIS comes to completion. We are required under the current ordinance to comply with a model code requirement by July 2025. However, I'll talk more about that. So the compliance approaches that FEMA required were one of three. The first pathway was to adopt a model floodplain management ordinance that considers impacts to fish habitat and requires mitigation to a no net loss standard. And the second pathway was to default to a permit-by-permit habitat mitigation assessment to achieve no net loss. And the third option, if we do neither of those things, is to prohibit all new development in the floodplain. So we have chosen pathway 2, and that is the content of what these amendments are. Later, with commission direction, we would possibly move forward with additional model floodplain code amendments by the required deadline. However, given that there is considerable political pushback on FEMA by cities and counties of the state on these regulations, and given the current uncertainty with respect to federal programs in general, it may be prudent to just adopt the permit-by-permit requirement for now and revisit this issue with the commission when we know more. So a little about the permit-by-permit approach. Through our existing development review process, planning would implement this approach. It is our understanding that Oregon City cannot legally force an applicant to comply with the permit-by-permit review unless that requirement is codified. So this amendment would codify the requirement to do a permit-by-permit review, and that is the very minimum we feel we can do to satisfy the FEMA requirement in the interim. That said, engineering staff does not anticipate many development proposals within the special flood hazard areas in the foreseeable future. We did some GIS analysis, and there are only 38 residential parcels within the floodplain and only 12 residential structures. As part of the permit-by-permit review, applicants would provide what's called a mitigation assessment, or MA, to show no net loss. It will include the following steps. The first would be to describe the site conditions and where impacts are expected to occur within what's called a riparian buffer zone, which is measured at a distance from the high water mark of water bodies. Then describe the project and any impacts to the floodplain functions within the special flood hazard area, and describe how the proposal would avoid, minimize, and mitigate impacts to achieve no net loss in 3 principal floodplain functions, which are called floodplain storage, water quality, and vegetation. The mitigation assessment would need to be prepared by a qualified professional, which would be a wildlife or fisheries biologist at the applicant's expense. So just a couple of slides which indicate what the amendments are that we're proposing. The first code language that would be changing is in the purpose statement, and that's adding language to reference the natural and beneficial values served by floodplains. Also adding in the warning and disclaimer of liability section, the statement that says, further, no permit granted herein shall be construed to guarantee compliance with otherwise applicable federal rules and regulations, including the Endangered Species Act. The next code section that would be amended is the administration section under E to state, in addition to any information necessary to satisfy this chapter, a permit application must include a flood habitat assessment report from a qualified expert evaluating any negative impact to floodplain function and identifying appropriate mitigation measures to ensure that any development will be in compliance with the 2016 National Marine Fisheries Services Biological Opinion No Net Loss Standards. All mitigation recommendations contained within the report, the qualified report, shall be included as permit conditions of approval. So for next steps, the Planning Commission reviewed these amendments and recommended their approval. And that would adopt the permit by permit approach. If they're adopted, staff would work with applicants to implement them. We have developed a mitigation assessment guideline document for applicants to provide more detail and clarity about what's required. We would like to revisit this topic with the commission when we know more about what direction FEMA is headed. And if directed, we would move forward with additional code amendments to implement FEMA's model code requirements by July 2025. And I'm happy to try to answer any questions you have about these.
All right, any questions? Go ahead.
So I just have one. So if an applicant or if a developer has an assessment completed and it addresses this no net loss requirement, is it then just kind of approved, I guess is the best way to say it? Or is there a further like, hey, we have to agree that you have in fact met the no net loss requirement?
My take on it is that staff at this point would be accepting that no net loss report as adequate.
Okay.
And until we learn more, that would be the approach. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, any other comments or questions? All right, so it's a public hearing, so we will open the public hearing. See if there's anyone in the audience that has a comment on this agenda item. All right, seeing none, we will close the public hearing. All right, and then we have a recommendation from staff and planning to do the first reading of ordinance 25-1003.
I move to approve the first reading of ordinance number 25-1003, Flood Management Overlay District Code Amendments.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Call for the vote. Oh, is there more? Sorry, go ahead. Oh, yeah, we got to read it.
Read it by title, please.
Yes.
Ordinance number 25-1003, an ordinance of the City of Oregon City adopting amendments to Oregon City Municipal Code, Chapter 17.42, Flood Management Overlay District.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Scott Wilson,
Aye.
Commissioner Adam Marl,
Aye.
Commissioner Mike Mitchell,
Aye.
and Commission President Rocky Smith.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, we're on to general business. Under number 9, we have A, which is the second reading of ordinance number 24-1013, vacating sections of the public right-of-way. So this is a second reading. Is there any staff comment or report?
I think, yeah, we're just recommending approval of the second reading. We answer any questions if you have any from the last meeting.
All right. Any questions about this? Okay, well, can take a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the second reading of ordinance 24-1013.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded.
Ordinance number 24-1013, an ordinance of the City of Oregon City vacating streets A, B, C, and D in Victoria Heights and J.T. Apperson subdivisions near 13900 Gain Street.
All right.
Commissioner Scott Wilson,
Aye.
Commissioner Adam Marl,
Aye.
Commissioner Mike Mitchell,
Aye.
and Commission President Rocky Smith.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, next we have under General Business B, Thimble Creek Marketing Assessment and Development Scenarios. This is an update and next steps. Who will be presenting? Aquila, are you going to introduce?
Yes,
Okay,
thank you.
Aquila
I will.
with,
I will
Community Development Director.
Thank you, Commissioner Smith. My name is Aquila Hurd-Ravitch with Community Development, and we've got James Graham with Economic Development, and our consultants are here, and they will kind of present the body of the work that they've been doing. And this focuses on the Thimble Creek Concept Plan area. The concept plan, as you know, was adopted in 2008, so it's been around for a long time. And since then, we've seen development occur at the north end and the south end. And the south end is residential, where there's some apartments built, and we've also seen a subdivision come in for the more residential piece of Thimble Creek. The north end is basically institutional. It's a county development. And what we're missing is the middle piece that's zoned campus industrial. And so we haven't seen any movement on the employment side of Thimble Creek. So I think it was in 2023, we applied for a grant from Metro to do an industrial site readiness study. And so we were awarded the grant, and with that, we put out an RFP and hired Johnson Economics and HHPR, and they carried on with some studies to look at existing conditions and do some scenario work. So they're going to present what we've come up with so far, and then we'll go from there. We'll go on to next steps. So I will turn it over to you.
I'm a project manager with the firm of Johnson Economics, and I'll let my colleague introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Tui Kao. I'm the planner with HHPR.
We've been privileged to work on this project over the last few months, and so today we have a presentation to really give you some of the highlights and some of the findings, and then we'll be available to ask any questions and have any discussion that you'd like to have. So the project was to do a market assessment and industrial readiness look at the Thimble Creek concept plan area. The plan area is located mostly to the east of Beaver Creek Road in the south portion of Oregon City. And it was quite large area, 450 acres, as mentioned. That was originally adopted in 2008, so 16 plus years ago now. There was a revision in 2020, but it didn't really impact or look so much at the industrial area. The idea of the concept plan is to create a whole sort of complete and sustainable community. So that's why it has a mix of uses between the residential and employment uses. And the main focus of this study was what's called the North Employment Campus. There's another employment area called the Mixed Use Employment Village along Beaver Creek Road that is more of a traditional office and retail mix is the idea of that zone, but we're focusing on the campus industrial. So the area also had a lot of sustainable goals attached to it in terms of both the land uses allowed, the vision for the district, and how all the uses would work together. And the area was planned for up to 5,000 new jobs. The North Employment Campus area is mainly focused on encouraging sort of office slash flex slash light industrial type uses, but in a campus environment with an emphasis on clean development and things like research and development, high-tech software, company headquarters and things like that, while restricting some more traditional industrial uses. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. So this project was looking
was the idea to take a look at this area, think about why the market may be responding slowly to building new employment uses and attracting new companies to this area and the sites that are available there, and identify factors that may be helping to cause that, and come up with some recommendations on how that might be addressed. So one bit of discussion that we included in the final analysis was just a quick overview of why employment land is important to a city. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but it's important to have viable, buildable, serviced employment land ready so that the city can undertake its economic development. And so that does a lot of things. You have more jobs and more job variety available to local residents. The idea, particularly with this plan area, was to emphasize sustainable wage jobs. So those are jobs that more closely can support the cost of living and cost of housing in the city. And to part of that is to have a healthy jobs to household ratio, sometimes called the jobs to housing ratio. And that is just a measure of how many local job opportunities as a community offer related to the number of households and working residents who live here. There's no exact precise number to put on that, but obviously having a stronger balance is good for the community and offering options to your residents. And then, of course, having the employment area is important to the idea of having a complete community, both for the plan area, which was part of the original vision, but also for the city and region. And the further out you go, you still want to have a nice balance of housing to jobs and residents. Very important is the impact of employment uses on your tax base and fiscal health of a community. So generally speaking, just as a general rule, residential uses can tend to use basically more in services than they contribute through tax revenue. And also as a general rule, commercial uses and industrial uses can be net contributors to the fiscal balance of the city, paying more in taxes than they require in services. There's always exceptions to that, but that's kind of the general rule, and that's a reason why you want to at least have a decent balance of some employment and those tax-paying types of uses mixed in with your residential community, so that you're not simply a bedroom community. And in the case of Oregon City, it's important to point out that there are some major land uses in your city that are non-taxpayers because they're public uses or faith-based and so on. And those are very important to the community. There's a reason they're here, but it also makes it even more important necessarily to have that, to have those employment uses as well. So getting into some of the factors that we found through this process, we did, I should note that the project process involved doing stakeholder outreach to landowners, real estate professionals, industrial professionals to talk about, to get feedback on what they see has been happening in this area. So that's where we started, and then we did a lot of existing conditions research to build towards our recommendations. But the major piece of the report is the factors that are really impacting the pace of development in the area. So there's a lot more detail on these in the report, but I'm going to go through them fairly quickly, but happy to answer any questions and add detail if you like. So public infrastructure costs was identified as a major barrier. There's to serve the parcels that are available, you're going to need improvements to all types of infrastructure, including road, utilities, water, sewer, everything that a site needs, and those services need to be brought to the site itself. Along Beaver Creek Road, there's more opportunity to do that because there are services there. But once you get into the interior of the plan area, you're talking about extending services, and that has a high cost to it. the buildable land and land assembly. So another challenge in this area is that there are about, in just the employment area, mind you, there's about 60 separate tax lots with 42 distinct owners. So there's obviously a lot of parcelization, a lot of need for land assembly to build larger sites. And there's some work that goes into that. And the other thing about making parcels work and finding larger sites is that a lot of the site is very divided and sort of cut up by particularly power line easements. And then there's also some issues such as wetlands and creeks and so on. But the major issue is the power line easements, which really cut right through the middle of that campus industrial area and restrict what, there are a lot of restrictions on what can be done inside these easements. And basically no built space is allowed. So that's going to greatly restrict what can happen there. The largest sort of, we went through the exercise of trying to look at parcels that might be assembled. This is very general and sort of groups different tax lots and different ownerships together, but it's just a look at what's possible. The largest parcel that we found was 21.5 acres. So that is sort of what an industrial user might call a medium-sized parcel, but really what you need to be aware of in this area is that you're limited to smaller to medium-sized parcels. You're not looking at the size of parcels that are available to attract, Intel Junior or something like that. You're looking at smaller users than that. The exception is that to the west of Beaver Creek Road, the community college has recently assembled the parcels that are available there. That amounts to about 40 acres. So that's going to be a larger sort of opportunity site. Again, there's going to be some issue with what the college plans to do with that and how soon. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So transportation and traffic, there are some stresses on the roads and intersections now. Those have been sort of planned for, they're known, and they also can be addressed. It's just important to know that sort of adding capacity and trying to alleviate some of these issues, if that cost falls on the developers or landowners, that's a pretty high barrier that goes along with all the other infrastructure costs we mentioned. Future street network, that is another thing that kind of cuts through the area. That is, the future street network is not defined. We put some general lines on the map, but those are not definite, and there's that can be worked through as the area is developed, but you just have to be aware that they're there. One thing that is necessary is another parallel access road parallel to Beaver Creek, and that obviously goes through at a diagonal, and so that creates some more irregularly shaped parcels and more fragmentation. Public and private utilities, generally the utilities are going to be available to the area. The capacity is not a problem, it's just that extra layer of extending those as part of the infrastructure. In terms of permitted land uses and business types, so this is a fairly large market-based issue that has come up. So the the sort of layout of land uses, permitted land uses in the campus industrial zone, the vision that I laid out earlier for sort of more of a high-tech research and development campus, that is certainly still in the cards. But what is the types of uses that are more conditional uses or even prohibited are some of the more traditional light industrial uses. And so one thing that we've heard is that brokers and folks who might be interested come to this area and they can't do some of the traditional things that might have higher demand right now. And things like that include warehouse and distribution uses, which is a big industrial user in the current market, but also just clarity on the ability to provide multi-tenant, like sort of flex industrial space, and making sure that the development code and the rules you have would allow that if you want to. But the perception is that by requiring, for instance, a company headquarters or a high-tech R&D facility to come, those are going to be more rare uses, and they're going to be slow to come as they have been. And that may persist into the future unless some more flexibility is added. Next is development code standards. We do have some recommendations there, and I'm going to wait until we get into the next part of the presentation. We'll go into more detail on that. And then finally, development incentives and funding. So those are things that might help entice recruitments and businesses to come to the area, and other ways that the city might contribute to some of the infrastructure costs. And I'll also be talking a little bit more about that in a minute. What can a city do to address some of these types of issues? There's a table included on page 4 of our report in your packet with more detail, but a very high level. This is a very high level summary of that table. There are different levels and obviously of involvement that the community might take. So obviously, if you go with the status quo, you wouldn't be making changes to zoning or development code necessarily. You'd still be relying on a market-driven, market timing approach to build out of that area. There has obviously been, some indicators that could be a long wait, and that there are obstacles to having that happen. Sort of the next level of engagement or policy steps you might take would be to update the development code, the zoning, consider rezoning. That's not a recommendation that we've included, but things like that the city can do through adoption. Updating the concept plan might include outlining a slightly new or different vision for the area, and then you'd have to follow through on that with changes to the code. A sort of moderate or intermediate step, which I think sounds like it will become more important, is making sure that there's communication with Clackamas Community College and partnerships with them. They have a major parcel now there in the area, and the positives are that some of the things that a community college would like to undertake are some of the things that are envisioned already for the Thimble Creek area. So things like skills training, R&D, business incubation, those types of things are the things that a community college can partner with. Need some communication, and obviously making sure that they are aware of some of the city's goals and what the city might contribute to that effort will be valuable. And finally, sort of the highest level of policy engagement, and probably the most effective in terms of speeding the pace of what's happening there, is to think more about contributions to infrastructure and development incentives, and this would likely require some new funding sources from the city to think about how can sort of a phased approach to the infrastructure investment take place. So with that, I want to get to some of the specific recommendations and discussion we had about the development code, and I'll turn that over to Twee to talk about that.
Yes, thank you, Brendan. So HHPR's role was to analyze the Thimble Creek Concept Plan itself, its existing conditions, infrastructure, and the development code standards of the campus industrial zone for any potential barriers to development in this area. So from our findings, it was clear that the existing concept plan does align with the city's current objectives and vision for this area, and still remains a viable framework for development. However, there are existing and significant infrastructural challenges that are impeding development here. Understanding this, our report highlights targeted adjustments to the regulatory standards that can enhance flexibility, improve site viability, and potentially make the area more attractive to industrial investment. So 2 primary changes that have been specifically recommended to help further align the campus industrial zone with the needs of new industries, are increasing the outdoor storage minimum from 25 to 50% of the site, and reducing current buffer requirements, which would allow for more flexibility for potential industrial development here. As you can see in the existing versus proposed development standards, the orange-brown area represents outdoor storage and the white is building area. These changes allow for more accommodations for industrial properties while still maintaining a site that's designed to meet aesthetic goals of the concept plan and the development code, such as still maintaining landscape buffers to shield parking and storage areas, or prioritizing the visibility of the building frontage along the front property line. I can switch to the next. So allowing for more outdoor storage space and decreasing the buffer requirements will provide more flexibility to development to meet a wider range of needs for various industries. That includes the multi-tenant flex developments and industrial parks that require more flexibility in workspace. We also recommended that the 25-foot buffer requirement is not required in the campus industrial zone properties that are adjacent to commercial uses, which is a current requirement of the development code. And that warehousing and distribution, which is currently a conditional use, is recommended to be permitted as an accessory use up to a certain percentage to just help streamline that approval process. And as an additional consideration, we do recommend in our report that current sustainability requirements can be reviewed for applicability and potential adjustments just to enhance feasibility in this area and just to make sure that it is still applicable. So.
And so this is my last slide. I wanted to touch on infrastructure funding. So as the report talks about the costs of infrastructure to serve, especially the interior of the plan area, are substantial and a pretty serious barrier. So there's some ideas in the report about what a community can do to help address those. So the status quo is really to keep working through, SDCs and the TSP and the CIP to build roads as needed. That's going to pass a lot of costs on to individual developers in many cases when they come to develop a specific site. And that cost may be prohibitive. There are other states' loans and grants that can help. They're generally fairly low dollar amount, but they can help, maybe get one or two early projects done to help kick off development and help create some momentum. Local improvement district is not recommended, so I won't spend a ton of time on that, but that's basically a method by which you create a district for the property owners and they help pay for the infrastructure. It's not it looks like the costs needed to complete the infrastructure for this plan are just going to be prohibitive, and that really beyond the reach of the property owners to handle that themselves. So finally is tax increment financing or a large bond issue. The tax increment financing is another word for urban renewal. This area is not currently in the urban renewal area, but that's something to consider. There's some examples in the report of similar employment areas around the region that have used the approach of adopting an urban renewal area early, use those funds to help build out infrastructure, and then as the area develops, you basically use that revenue growth to pay back the costs of infrastructure. That's been successful in a number of communities now, including Hillsborough, Tualatin, Wilsonville, Sherwood, and it's a more common approach. So that is our presentation for today. As I said, there's a lot more detail in the report, and we're happy to answer any questions or have any discussion that you'd like.
All right. I have a few questions, but I'll see if anyone else has anything first. Okay, I'll go, I guess. So if we go back to the map. So one first question would be, I want to get clarification maybe from our city manager. I thought that the county, or sorry, excuse me, I thought that the college only has those 2 parcels for 30 acres, and that last, the parcel next to the high school is not theirs. Because that would be the 40 acres. I'm thinking it's actually 30 acres they have.
I'd have to reach back out. My understanding was that it was the 10 and a half and the 19.25.
That was mine as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we want to check on that. I think that missing piece in the center there between the college pieces and then what would be the high school location, if that 10 acres has not been acquired by the college, I think that's something we need to know and look at.
I believe the county owns
No,
some of that, don't they?
Well, there's houses, it's
Oh, no,
3
that's right.
parcels, right? I think it's 3 lots.
it's
but-
3, I think it's a couple flag lots.
Yeah. Anyway, let's just check on it. And then the other question I have is, where it shows future street network, is there not a future street considered for the high school side? Basically, at one point, there was a concept or thought of high school road curving around and intersecting Beaver Creek.
I can answer that. So I think you're referring to Loader Road. And
It would connect to Loader, I think.
yeah, it's kind of, I don't know how to describe, but if you see that purple line that kind of points toward that 10 acre at an angle.
Yes.
That kind of represents Loader Road.
Okay.
And it was originally, it's still in the TSP, envisioned
straight
to
across.
continue going kind of through that at an angle and connecting up with High School Road.
Got it.
We've done some studies to see if that's even possible.
Sure.
There's so many environmental constraints that.
Through there.
Yeah, it's still a road envisioned in the TSP. But that piece on the other side didn't really impact this
Okay,
study.
sure.
Yeah.
Okay, and I guess the only thing I have as a comment is, my concern would be about the expansion of the outdoor storage and what that does to visibility from the streets. So, and I know that's one of the reasons it was kind of shrunk down a little bit. So that's my only comment. But this is just an update. Is there any other?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
But James Graham, Economic Development Manager.
Can I ask one
Yeah,
Sure, go ahead.
question?
Mike, go first.
On the map, that the 94.3 acre section that's kind of various shades of green, what's the zoning there, or the status of, why is that not included as buildable areas?
So that all has it all has the CI zoning, it all has the same zoning. That's the area that the power lines run through for the most part. Other parts of it were identified in the concept plan as possible green space and green corridors. And so I put the yellow blobs on there, but the underlying map comes from the concept plan itself. And those are the areas that were identified as remaining undeveloped in that plan.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Graham.
Thank you. So the next steps that we'd like to discuss with you would include a recommendation and request of you that two of your fellow commissioners be appointed to work with staff to really address this area. As you know, this area's been Thimble Creek, actually it's been the Beaver Creek and Thimble Creek area. It's been on the drawing board for a long time. And we thought that it would be helpful to work with the City Commission to move this concept plan forward. So what we would ask of you
of those two individuals would be to enhance communication with the full city commission. In other words, these two individuals would be champions, and they would be your point people in terms of communication and keeping you up to date as well as with staff. Also, would ask that those individuals work with staff to develop strategies to help mitigate the various challenges that were discussed just previously with our consultants. And then also work with staff to engage institutional property owners and individual property owners of larger tracts, as well as with also policy options as well in terms of addressing these issues. And also with regard to resources, to work with staff to identify resources that might help pay for these challenges and to mitigate these challenges. It might also include conversation with state government with regard to funding that they would have available for these types of things. So that's what the champions would be asked to do. The other thing we'd ask you to do is that the City Commission adopt via resolution the Thimble Creek Industrial Land Readiness Strategic Plan in spring of 2025, so that that is adopted, and then we could satisfy, I think, Metro's requirement, because they did provide us with some funding to do this study. So I do also understand from early conversations that the mayor has volunteered herself to be a part of the two, or one of the two. But of course, that's the commission's decision. So that's our recommendation, and that's what our request of you.
Oh, boy. I was going to make the assumption that we would have that conversation when the mayor returned. However, I don't know if anyone has any other, is there a timeline on how quick we want commissioners on that acted?
I really sooner rather than later. There's not a hard and fast deadline. We do have grant deadlines to meet, and we're trying to get this wrapped up in April-May timeframe. So I think if you wanted to push it out to the next meeting when everybody was here and have that discussion, I think that would be fine. I don't think we can't really prolong it too much longer than that, just so we can kind of move on with the work, but there's a little bit of flexibility in there.
Or what, is it going to be a regular type of meeting, just so people that are considering being a part of it know whether or not they'd be able to?
Well, we could structure it and accordingly. We leave that open because there are certain things that staff would be more suited to do because of the workday. Sure. And then there will be other things that would be more suited for a commissioner and staff to do. So we can leave that flexible.
All right, so my recommendation, however it could go either way, is have that conversation with the mayor comes back. Being she's the one that wants to serve on that, is there any other commissioners that have an interest in it so that we know that when we have that conversation that is interested? Anyone else that's interested?
I'm going to be careful with my wording. And I'm not necessarily volunteering,
right?
But I would be willing. I do have a little bit of a personal stake in it. I live about 3 blocks away from the north border of the North Employment Lands, and I drive the streets that are going to be most impacted by the traffic every day. So, like I said, willing, not necessarily volunteering.
Okay, got it. Anyone else? Silence.
I would be willing to as well.
All right. I mean, this can change, but I just want to jot names in. That way we have something to have a conversation about.
And I agree.
Okay.
Have a conversation with them when the mayor's present.
Yeah, I do as well. All right. I think we are, anything else?
I was just going to say, we just preliminary, we jumped on OC map, and the parcels in between, just north of the high school, looks like one's owned by the school district, right on Beaver Creek Road.
Oh,
And then the
okay.
2 others are in private ownership.
Okay, so there's,
You know, we get our tax data updated quarterly,
okay.
but I'm pretty sure those
Okay,
3
thank you.
are still held
Yeah,
individually.
okay. All right, very good. All right, I think that's it. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, so that brings us to 9C. We had interviews last week for potential appointments to the Planning Commission. That was a special meeting, and so we wanted to put that on the agenda for our regular meeting tonight to actually make an appointment. And so if there is a motion in that realm, we can do that.
I move to appoint Victoria Meinig to the Planning Commission.
Second.
All right, that's moved and seconded.
Commissioner Scott Wilson,
Aye.
Commissioner Adam Marl,
Aye.
Commissioner Mike Mitchell.
Aye.
Commission President Rocky Smith.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, this is an item added to the agenda. This will be 9D, Special Events Commissioner Mitchell.
So by coincidence, over the last 2 days, I've been contacted by 2 individuals involved with 2 different city-sponsored special events that have happened in the past, asking me about the status of this year. I think what's happened, last year, the applications were open January through April. So we're already into that time frame. And I think what's happened to us is, I think we were all hoping that the DMMO would be spun up by now and would be able to take this on. It's pretty obvious that's not going to happen in time for those organizations to plan their summer events and make a request. There's also the fact that we funded it before out of the general fund, and the expenditures would be in the next biennium, and we don't have a budget yet. So it's kind of caught in this weird timing thing, but if we don't figure out something very soon, we're in danger of potentially losing some long-standing special events, city-sponsored special events. So that's why I wanted to bring it up tonight. I don't know if we can do more than ask staff for alternatives and discuss it at our first March meeting, but we got to get moved, because, you know, if we want to stick, if the end of April still makes sense, you'd be looking at less than 2 months for organizations to put their plan together and make a request. So there's some urgency to it, and that's why I wanted to bring it up tonight.
Well, in terms of what's left in the fund, so in the kitty, so to speak, it's about $4,600 left for the remaining. Because we are now at the end of the biennium, so there's not much money left. So we're faced with that challenge.
Okay, so we can, we can bring back some options related to, you know, how we continue this program as we navigate the end of a biennium and a budget process to go through, and just make some decisions based on what's available. So we can discuss that with James and with Matt and come back with some options for the commission.
Okay.
And you can come back at our first March meeting with that?
Yep, try and see what we can get going, yeah.
Okay. And would be potentially, to avoid the biennium end issue, would potentially using transient room tax funding
Certainly.
be something to consider?
It could be, yes. I mean, I would argue it's eligible. I mean, yes, I think the commission certainly has that authority to utilize that as a funding source for this program.
Okay. I'd like to see that presented as an option. Thank you.
All right. Anything else on that? Okay, that did go quick, but we didn't get into it, so that's good. The next meeting will be long.
I'm surprised you don't have a comment.
I have too many comments, but I also want to get out of here
Understandable.
before midnight. All right, so I think we're at communications, city manager.
I do not have any updates for tonight. Thank you.
All right, commissioners. Anyone in the room?
I'll bring up something very,
I had to, sorry.
I'll bring up something.
Okay, go
Again,
for it.
I've been very short. When we had our goal-setting retreat, I made a mention that I had a list of big stuff and a list of little stuff. And I didn't get to talk about the little stuff. And I'm going to just kind of tease them out one at a time.
Okay, go for it.
So, last night I went to the Two Rivers Neighborhood Association meeting, and it was at the end of the Oregon Trail Center. And this is not what I want to comment on, but I will just say as an aside, Corinne, and I'm not going to remember her last name, who's the new executive director of Clackamas Heritage Partners, gave a 10 or 15-minute presentation on their plans. It was a terrific presentation. She seems like a ball of fire, and I think we're going to see good things out of Clackamas Heritage Partners and great ideas of what we could do at that facility. So that is terrific. And Mr. Conkle, you can stop me here if you're already thinking about this, but the little idea, as I'm driving up, we know we don't have enough parking when we do the concerts and 4th of July. I'm driving up, I look across the street, and there's a wonderful empty gravel parking lot where Clackamas Landscape Supply used to be. So why don't we consider opening that parking lot for the concerts and for 4th of July. There's a gated driveway entrance for vehicles. The corner that's closest to the end of the Oregon Trail Center is right next to the driveway and parking lot for the Amtrak station, and there's a crosswalk. Seems like it would be an easy thing to do. I know we make some money on Parks makes some money charging on in the EOT lot. Maybe they could do the same thing across the street, or partner with a nonprofit if they don't have the bandwidth to do it on their own. So something I think we should consider.
If I was the community development director, I'd say, we got to deal with off-street parking. But since I'm the city manager, I'm going to give that to the community development director to figure out how to unwind.
There's no more parking minimums in that area.
Oh, see, there we go. So we'll take a look at it and see what we can figure out.
Okay, so we're only getting one of the little ones tonight? Yeah. Okay, and was the special events one of the little ones, or?
No, that one came up later.
That was the medium size one?
Yeah. Yeah, that one, I think that was more medium size.
Just as a comment, on the same parking area, I'm one that has been kind of judgmental, I guess, of the lack of advertising and recognition we give the train station as being there, and under-promoted and undervalued, I think. And I haven't ridden the train, I have to admit. I have lots of family and friends who have. And I was down there the other night picking some people up from the train station, and I was shocked because I had not actually been down there at a time where a train was coming in or to see the crowd, and it was packed. So much so that the parking was an issue and other things. I was, pleased because that means it's getting used. I just think in the future when we talk about end of the Oregon Trail or the parking situation, or even those pieces of property as urban renewal pieces, that's something we really need to not forget, is the expansion and the possible future of the train station and where these people are going to park and where things are going to, how that plans out in the future. So I think it's something to keep on our radar. Commissioner Morrow.
Thank you. I'm supportive of looking into that, so thank you, Commissioner Mitchell, for bringing that up. And on the same topic, or related topic that you brought up about the presentation that you received about future plans for the end of the Oregon Trail, I am eager to hear those as well. I figured that we would have heard them when she came and presented to us. And instead, when that turned into a money ask, it kind of turned into a presentation that I was not expecting. So I will be looking forward to hearing about that because I've heard great things about her and her leadership. And I'm really excited about getting some new energy into the future of that facility.
All right, go ahead.
If I could just add one thing, I just want to let the commission know, there's been, we don't typically have a lot of federal funding, right? But Meals on Wheels would be an example, right, where we have reimbursement coming in. Aquila shared with me information from the Oregon Department of Transportation related to a recent executive order addressing the Infrastructure Investment Act and Jobs Act and the Inflation Reduction Act. So we're just kind of getting this and trying to figure out what things mean, what's applicable. We have $4 million for Washington Street. We have the quiet zone money that's being utilized right at the moment. But a memo was issued by the Transportation Secretary, lays out new criteria by which these discretionary grants will be evaluated, advises that the Department of Transportation shall prioritize projects that are 1, in communities with marriage and birth rates higher than the national average, 2, prohibit recipients of Department of Transportation support or assistance from imposing vaccine and mask mandates, and 3, require local compliance or cooperation with federal immigration enforcement. So I just bring this up as, we were already struggling. We were receiving some grants for our electrical vehicle work. We already know has been taken away. So we're still kind of navigating through this. Tonight we heard a discussion about WIFIA, significant agreement on federal funding. So, I think we're trying to navigate through this and understand what it means. If we've already entered into agreements, are those contracts protected? If we've entered into it, but we haven't taken any money yet. But I just, like I said, I just wanted you to be aware that, there potentially may be impacts to projects that we've prioritized or have been approved for or may have already started. And I just can't give you an answer yet what any of this means. If it's truly going to be available, if a court's going to say you can't do that because these, appropriations have already been made. We're not going to violate state law with our Oregon City Police Department as it relates to immigration enforcement. That is a federal responsibility. And I think Chief Davis has provided, pretty good information and guidance about how we will operate as an organization. So I try not to get too one way or the other on these things. It's going to work itself out. They're good projects. They were awarded funds. But we'll just kind of keep you informed if there's something significant. The one that really worries me is WIFIA. That is a big nickel for us. And we are committing funds as we speak.
All right, maybe Mike can throw out another little one so we can end it on a...
It's not snowing.
Yeah, that's a good one.
All right, meeting adjourned.
Thanks.